I am joined today by head consultant Katharine, who, regardless of whether you can hear her or not, is our head consultant at Posturite. In this webinar, Katharine is going to discuss the issues around working at home with computers. Katharine will focus on changes that can be made quickly to support working postures and what can be done simply to ensure we remain healthy and productive when working at home, particularly in this current environment when a lot of us have had to react very quickly. Katharine is a member of the Chartered Society of Physiotherapists, chartered member of the Institute of Safety and Health, and holds a master's degree in ergonomics. This unique combination of qualifications, together with her vast experience working within healthcare, food, retail, and the utility sectors, enables Katharine to offer a very broad range of training, education, and health and safety management in the workplace. She begged me not to say all of that today, but I thought I'd have a bit of fun. So, Katharine, welcome. How are you?
I'd have been a lot better had I not heard that lot. Thank you, Chris. Good morning, everybody else, who I think would be better behaved than Chris is. I was supposed to be in the US actually, but it's of no surprise to anybody that actually I am here. And since not going, I thought my diary was going to be very empty, but I have been inundated by questions, both from employers and individuals, about working from home and how they can prevent some of the problems. And so this is why I put this webinar together. It has been put together in a fairly short time frame, so do forgive me if it's a bit rough and ready. We will be able to have questions at the end. Chris is going to keep an eye on them and ask me questions at the end. If you have any technical problems, please, we will be recording. In fact, we are recording this. It will be available afterwards. So please listen back onto that. So right. I'm intending to cover these items. So why good setup is important, look through the basics, common problems, and my thoughts on what you can do to improve. And as I am a physio, of course, the importance of movement, but you will see that that is probably a really important thing as we are all having to adapt to different ways of working at the moment. So why is good posture important? Those of you who you normally work in an office will be more than aware of these issues. It's really important now, though, as we're working from home and we're trying to keep things going, that we are all preventing discomfort and pain so we can get on with what we can get on with. So the basics really remain, and we really want to look, particularly, I suppose, focusing on neck pain, back pain. Actually, all of these ones can be really quite a problem for us. So these are the driving forces as they are when we're working in the office. This, unfortunately, may be what we get if we're just sent home with a device. I don't really need to say any more, I suppose, but if we don't give it a little bit of thought, these postures, we may cope with them in the short time, but if we allow those to continue, we know that pain and discomfort will happen. So we really need to be a bit proactive and see what we can do to try and improve things. You will have seen setups like this before. This is the standard setup, and the fundamentals do not change when we are working at home. This is the sort of postures we need to try and achieve. Obviously, it is potentially more difficult in these more temporary situations. So what I think we need to do is re-look at this and just make sure we understand what we're trying to achieve and why, rather than just going through a set of setups, as it were. So I want to first of all look at the key points of the chair. What are we trying to achieve when we're setting up our chair? Well, there's two main things. We want to make sure that it supports a suitable position. And so that is, making sure that our forearms are level with the desk and in a nice neutral position. If we don't get that right, we're going to compromise our upper limbs. We also need to make sure that our back is protected, and ideally we want our hips to be above our knees to help us keep our lumbar curve and help us to be in the right position. So that's a really important thing when we're looking at chair height. We also need to make sure that our chair provides us with suitable back support. I'll be talking a little bit more in a minute about why we need a supported good position rather than just trying to force a good posture. But it really is important that our chair is there to provide support for us. When we look at our screens, what are we trying to achieve with the position we put it in? Well, we need to be able to read what is on the screen, or else we can't do our work. Or if we can't read it clearly, we're going to adopt some poor postures. And that's why we need to make sure it encourages a good position. So what do we need to do for that? We normally need to make sure our screen is in the middle, so we're not twisted or bent. We need to make sure it's approximately arm's distance, because that is usually a comfortable viewing distance. And we need to make sure the top of the display is about eye height for most of us. It does depend sometimes with different glasses, so that our head is in a good position and not leaning forwards. So that is why we do what we do with those things. And if we look at our input device, again, the input device needs to help us do our job, and it needs to be able to be used in a suitable position. So what does that mean? It means we have to have a suitable device if possible, and our arms are positioned relaxed by our body with our wrist and hand in a neutral posture. So I want us to keep in mind what we're trying to achieve when we're looking at getting our postures right in perhaps some more temporary situations. Now, for those of you that work at home or work on the move regularly, you probably already have been provided with a selection of equipment. Now, I've got some examples here. Now, if you have been provided with that, this will allow you pretty much to get a good setup. But I would encourage you to make sure that you get as good a setup as you possibly can. Those of you may not have all this equipment or may have some of it. And so what I want to go through is some of the common problems we might get if we don't have this equipment, and what we can do to try and improve things ourselves. Can I just remind you that short-term comfort is often not a good predictor of long-term health. So just because it feels comfortable for 5-10 minutes slouching on your sofa doesn't mean to say that's going to provide good long-term support and comfort. So it's worth getting the basics right to start with. So the first thing that many people will say is, I don't have an adjustable chair. Well, yes, it would be lovely for us all to have one. But you know, you can use cushions or pillows to get you to that right height that I was talking about. Or you might have a wedge at home, or you might have a wedge in your car. Maybe you could use that. Sometimes using a cushion and a rolled up towel can be a great bit of kit, particularly if you're trying to get support in your lumbar spine. So there's a lot you can do to adapt a normal dining room chair or something similar to actually provide good support. And I would encourage you to do that. Maybe you don't have a way of, you don't have a laptop stand or a Surface stand. Well, you can actually raise these screens very suitably with maybe, if you have a laptop raiser, obviously that's fine, but a plastic box, pile of books, biscuit tin, something like that can really provide a good platform for you to put things like that on. Just a little note of caution, if you are going to use anything that's flammable, please make sure that you put, maybe a table mat or a tray on top of it before you put a hot laptop on top. Maybe you haven't been provided with a mouse or a keyboard. Do you know what? A lot of people have them knocking around. I have several in my garage, or my brothers have. So, try if you can borrow a keyboard or mouse, or actually just buy them. They're not that expensive, and it can make a big difference to your setup. It doesn't need to be fancy. You just need to have it separate from your input device to be able to have a better setup. If you can't get a separate input device, you can make a lot of difference by rotating your tasks and taking more small breaks. And I'll talk more about that in a minute. Maybe when you've got yourself positioned in your chair with your pillows and your towels, your feet aren't getting enough support. Well, again, I used to say a telephone directory, but that's showing my age. You could use a large old book, a ream of paper, again, plastic box or tin. That will do really well as supporting your feet, and it's worthwhile going on a look for something like that to be able to make a difference. Ooh, let me close that. And last of all, and I know it's not something to be supplied with, but it is a common problem, lack of movement. This is absolutely down to every single one of us. And I can't emphasize this enough. The worse your position, the more you need to move. And if you do that, you'll be able to remain comfortable, pain-free and productive in the short time you're at home. I mean, trust me, moving really does work, and it's a really good thing that you always have available to you, no matter what your situation's like. Now, I'm very fortunate. I have a lovely sit-stand desk at home. However, I am moving, so things are not what they used to be. And also, I have a daughter coming home from university, maybe a little sooner than I was expecting. So I'm not always going to be able to use my lovely workstation as she is. So I've had to go on the scout and find what I could use instead. So let me show you what compromise I've come up with. So here we go. This is what I found on the left-hand side on my dining room table, things I could use to raise my laptop if I need to. I don't know if any of you recognise the big black book, but it's actually Grey's Anatomy. I knew I'd find a use for it sometime. Then I've got my chair. You see, it's a dining room chair, and I have found that with one cushion, an old towel, and I have to say I've borrowed my daughter's cushion back there, I can achieve the right sitting height to use at my dining room table with, as you see, my laptop on top of my best biscuit tin, my favourite biscuit tin, that one is an old Ben-Hur tin. Anyway, enough of that. And then I've got a keyboard and mouse. And do you know what? That is a really good, suitable working position for me. I will still get up and around more, but you can do an awful lot with the clutter that you have in your home. Sometimes clutter is a good thing. Now, I said earlier that it was really important to get a supported position, and many of you have seen this slide before. But if we require the body to hold us in a position, our muscles are tense, our circulation reduces, and we are more likely to get injury and pain. So it's really important that we find a supported, good position. I want you to take a moment maybe to think about your work. And think about whether, do you always have to be sat in front of your portable device? Do you ever take phone calls, conference calls, you writing notes, reading documents, or just thinking? Well, if you're at home, you've probably got a number of places that you can go and work. You know, go and sit on your sofa or in your easy chair to take calls or write notes. Sit down with may I say, pen and paper. You don't have to be sat at your workstation all the time. We get into the habit sometimes at work because that's where we live, as it were. But let's be more creative about this. And you never know, in thinking about this, maybe you'll actually develop some good habits. So when you're back in the office, you'll move around more and use the different spaces that are provided for you. I love this picture. I found it. I call this old school working from home. Now, I know that these people aren't working, but actually, if we're looking at what they're doing, I mean, the lady on the right could be using a mobile phone. I know she's not. And then we've got somebody reading a book and somebody standing to use a telephone. Well, looking at the postures, they're all pretty good. And if you look at the sitting postures of the ladies, they're sitting nice and high with their hips above their knees. So I couldn't resist putting this in and just sharing it with you. So I don't want to go backwards, but active working at home is so important. I want to come on to perhaps things you need to just double check if you are having problems. So many of us will struggle with back discomfort. If you get this, these are the things I really want you to check. You know, have you got your sitting height correct? Are your feet supported? Is your back supported, or are you leaning forwards? It's a habit a lot of us get. And are you taking suitable breaks and moving frequently? No matter how good position you've got, if you don't move, you're going to land up with problems. If you're struggling with your neck, again, check that screen position. Is it in the right position? Is it too high or too low? Maybe you've got some glare issues. Are you leaning forwards? And again, I'm talking about breaks. As you can see, there's quite a lot of repetition here. It's about good position and breaks. Maybe you're struggling with your arms and your wrists. Check the position of your forearms and wrists. Do you need to change your height of your chair or add another cushion to make sure your hand position is correct? Check for those awkward positions and make sure your arm is not coming away from your body. If you're doing a lot of mouse work and your arm is away from the body, maybe think about moving your keyboard out of the way and bring the mouse more centrally. Or even perhaps put the mouse in front of the keyboard if you're doing a lot more mouse work than keyboard work. I haven't talked a lot about eyes, but it is important. It's important that the screen is the right position so you don't get eye strain, but also that you do take regular breaks. Maybe, we should be looking away from our screens into the distance about every 20 minutes, and that's as important when you're at home as when you're in the office. And in fact, there's probably more interesting things to look for when you're at home. And at break times, rest your eyes. If you're not in self-isolation, if you're just working from home, get out and about, go and enjoy your local community. So, key messages. Can I just say, it's not all about the equipment. I put this slide in here because actually this person could set up very well, but they're not. And I would encourage you to really make the best use of any equipment that you have at home or you've been provided by your employer. It doesn't take much to turn a poor position into a good position. Other thing I want to talk about is you may find that several of you will be working at home together, or maybe you're sharing your space because you've got children around. We need to think about the ability to concentrate. So maybe you need to draw up some home guidelines. Maybe you need to say, well, I'm going to be working during these hours. I don't want to be disturbed. Having some clear rules, I suppose, will help everybody to feel, fulfilled, able to do their job, but also feel that family life can go on. But also take those opportunities. When you're breaking, why don't you break with the other people in your household? Enjoy that experience. Use the privacy. Maybe during some of your breaks, get down on the floor, do some exercises. I know I do that sometimes, but if you're out of breath, do warn your colleagues before you phone them, because they may think something odd's going on. And your dog, if you have a dog, really appreciate the more walks that you can give them when you're working at home. So do think about the way you work, set some boundaries, but also take those opportunities that working in a different place provides you. Now, no matter how good your setup is, we all need to move. Breaks are absolutely vital. Changes of activity. So yes, I've encouraged you to look at the tasks that you do and to change your postures and your working positions doing that. So that's really important. But if you are at the workstation all the time, take those small micro breaks, shake your hands, move your shoulders throughout when you're working. We also need to rest our eyes, and actually taking these breaks will assist in our stress control. And whilst you're taking a break, you can think about how you're going to prioritize your work maybe. So they're really vital to keep us healthy, but also to help us be productive. A lot of people ask me, how long should I be working? Now, it's really hard because we all work in different ways and the setups are very different. But I've tried to provide a little bit of guidance here. So, if you've got a good workstation set up, we generally say some sort of movement every 20 minutes and get your bottom off, off the chair every hour. That would be a really good rule of thumb. And if you can do it sometimes, but maybe get caught another time, that's fine. Maybe you've got a compromised laptop or tablet setup, so you're having to work like this lady is in my screen. Do you know, you probably need to move every 15 minutes. And if you do that, you know, you're probably, your body will probably cope really well, particularly if this is for a short period of time, maybe a week or two. Maybe all you've got is a small mobile device like a phone or a smartphone. Do you know what? You're going to have to swap and move your hands really every 5 minutes and take a break every 15. Try not to hold on to those small devices. Find a shelf or a table to put things on rather than keep holding them. But remember, the worse the position, the more you need to move. Now, I've got a few very simple exercises here just to really finish off. All of these are available on our website and many more, but you know, think about some simple exercises for your neck, for your shoulders. It will make a big difference, particularly if you find yourself in slightly awkward positions. Maybe you realize your hands and your forearms are not in such good positions, and these simple sort of exercises can be very helpful. Just taking a break and moving your hands around can be really, really beneficial. And then some simple ones again for the back. I think most of us actually are used to stretching up and stretching backwards, you know, particularly in the afternoon. Try and be a bit more proactive. You know, if you haven't got an ideal setup and you are, you know, making do with the dining room chairs, because with not as much movement as your office chair, then try some of these more regularly. Maybe, you know, once an hour, you know, pick an exercise to do. Be really beneficial. So really just sort of coming to the summary here, I think my key messages are, you know, consider what you need to do and what is the right place to do it. If you have an opportunity to move away from your you know, computer and sit in an easy chair or sit outside to be productive on a piece of work, then that would be great. Set up the best you can. You know, if you've been provided by things by your employer, that's fantastic. But there's a lot we can do from home, as I've said, with biscuit tins and cushions, all sorts of stuff. And do you know what? If you have some really good ideas, why don't you send them through to us? We might even be able to put them on our website. I'll have to see if Chris is up for that. Remember, the more the worse position you have, the more you move, and your body will cope. We have an amazing tool in our body if we just give it a chance. And maybe we'll learn some new tips from this. Be creative, enjoy the advantages, enjoy working in a different place and a different outlook. But please, any concerns, raise them with your employer as soon as possible. If you've got any underlying conditions and you're struggling, please let your employer know so they can take action and make sure that you get the support that you need. And equally well, you know, we're always here to try and support you the best we can too. So please feel to get in touch. So really, I think, Chris, I'm pretty much done with my lecture. So have we got anything interesting coming through?
Well, Katharine, as you can imagine, there have been a few questions, and particularly focused around the sort of COVID-19 response, which obviously everyone is, probably most people that are listening are sort of madly trying to look for advice on what to do in such a short space of time. So one of the first questions here, and I'm going to paraphrase some of them a little bit just so they make sense at the time I'm asking them rather than when they were asked. But in the light of the current pandemic, what's the legal stance with regards to the DSE set up in crisis? Does it change?
Oh, that's a real interesting one. I wish I had my colleague here. In fact, I might try and get a lawyer on to talk about this. I don't think, I mean, we've still got the Health and Safety at Work Act. We're still required to do everything reasonably practicable. And I think that's the stance we should take, in the fact that we're in a situation, we need to support people as best we can. And if we can make reasonable adjustments to allow them to work, then I think that is supportive. If we, with these good interventions, good sensible interventions, prevent people developing problems and allow them to work, then actually the legality becomes a little bit of a moot point, might I say. Surely only if we have a problem does it become an issue. But for me, it's doing everything sensible. But can I just emphasize my last point? If somebody is struggling, if they are not able to work at home, they are having pain or discomfort, they need to speak to their managers, because then obviously particular action must be taken.
I suppose a lot of this is actually in line with some of the current changes and guidance we're having to give on agile working anyway. So although it's different people are suddenly doing it that weren't before, the DSE guidance didn't really fully cover some of the agile working environments they've got anyway, have we, Katharine?
Yeah, I think people are looking at different ways of working. We've had lots of discussions around it, but I am hopeful that actually most of us are not going to have to work in compromised situations, because if it becomes a more permanent, not a permanent, but a longer period of time, if 10 days, 2 weeks turns into 2 months, then I would be expecting employers to be making far more concrete provisions for people. So I'd expect people to start providing equipment if it's not a question of a couple of weeks, it's turning into months, if that kind of makes sense.
Absolutely. Okay, so obviously there'll be a lot of staff working from home who have never worked from home before, and they will not have the ideal setup from day one. Would employees be expected to complete a DSE risk assessment before being allowed to work from home?
I would like to think that the employers would be checking that their employees can set up suitably. Would I require them to do, the in-depth checklist that they do in the office? Probably not, but I would be asking them, I'd be providing them the training to make sure they can set up correctly, and I would then be asking whether they can set up correctly. In an ideal world, yes, we would do an assessment, but I think we may need to be a bit more pragmatic than that at the moment.
Absolutely. Okay, we have to order a lot of equipment. So we being the person that posed the question, we have to order a lot of equipment, which will take a while. So can employees work from home in the meantime?
I'm having a problem with my mute button there. Again, I'm not sure on the legal status, but what I would be saying is that I'm surprised it's taking a while to come. That's a bit disappointing. But what I would say is, I think as long as people know it's coming, they're provided with the advice similar to what I've done today. What can they do some short-term fixes themselves? As long as they move more, then I think probably that is okay. But again, I can't emphasize enough the feedback loop. If people are struggling, they need to be provided case by case basis.
Okay, right, here's an interesting one. Would we have to weigh up the risk of catching the virus versus temporarily having an incorrect desk setup? Is that something we need to consider?
That's a really interesting one. Would you weigh up the risk of catching a virus? Probably to a degree.
I think with all of these things, it's all about risk assessment anyway, isn't it? So everyone's having to weigh up all the various risks that are going on and come up with a sensible solution for it. So I guess the answer is probably yes, but there's probably a bit more you can add, Katharine.
Yeah, I mean it is always a balance of risk, and I mean as we have been doing here, we have been identifying people who, for example, may have a greater risk of harm if they catch the virus, and those people are obviously going to be our priority to get out of harm's way. And so what we would be doing to support them, and we'd be probably getting them home and out of the way quicker than we would those people who are at less risk. But yes, I think it is all a balance, and it's not an easy thing to weigh up.
Okay, here we go. Some more questions here. Would a simple workstation setup at home fact sheet be sufficient to give staff and tell them to contact the employer if they need additional support during the pandemic? So is a fact sheet, as long as it's detailed enough to give to employees, or is there more that needs to be done before someone can be sent home?
I think the fact sheet may be helpful. It does depend, what equipment and what the setup. That if you give them a fact sheet but you only give them a laptop and you expect them to go home for a month, I would say that probably isn't a good balance. However, if they have some supportive equipment, but maybe not a chair and a desk, and you expect them to be home for a couple of weeks, and you've been given advice about movement, it probably is. So probably need a little bit more information, but I think there is definitely a place. And I think we have to remember that we are in a fast moving situation and we need to protect people and also protect the economy as well. And we need to balance that up. So yes, I think in some situations that is good enough, but there is a bit of a caveat on that as well.
Thanks, Katharine. Okay, I noticed that many laptop screens are glossy, whereas office monitors have a matte finish. I expect that will mean we will suffer far more glare. Any hot tips for managing glare with a laptop at home?
Yes, I'm always very saddened by the shiny laptops. No real hot tips apart from the fact is you've got a lot more flexibility at home as to how you could position yourself, and you've got your own curtains and blinds that you can pull, whereas in the office you have to accommodate other people's wishes as well. So I think probably the fact you've got much more choice about where to work will probably allow you to overcome a lot of those issues.
Oh, sorry, Katharine, my turn to lose the mute button. Okay, so should employees be providing equipment for the home?
Oh, that was a quick one. I would say that if it's going to be more than a couple of weeks, then the short answer is probably yes. What equipment, I think may vary. Personally, I think I would love to see everybody be able to sort of set up at home. But we also have to think, actually, is the business, will the business be able to allow them to work from home in the future? We've seen quite a shift going on anyway. So maybe actually this might open doors to say that actually they could work from home on an occasion anyway. So yes, do you know what? I would like to see everyone providing it, but also we've got to be pragmatic. And if it is only going to be for a couple of weeks and they can set up correctly, maybe it is overkill. So there is a balance to be struck there.
Thanks, Katharine. Okay, and this is particularly applicable to those that are new to home working. Any other tips to give when it comes to working from home and having small children? They may not understand the guidelines or the boundaries that you mentioned earlier. I'll highlight this as some nurseries and schools may already be close to closing.
That's really hard. I remember it was a long time ago when my daughter was young, and I took on a project when she was little. And you're quite right; they don't understand the boundaries at all. I think every family dynamic is different. I suppose this is a personal view. I would like to think that we as a community will work together and maybe share childcare, so that maybe somebody has the children in the morning so people can crack on, and then somebody else will share that in the afternoon. I know there may be difficulties around isolation, but I really think you're right, it's very difficult. You can only give a child, ask them to self-occupy for a while. So I'm afraid I have no quick fixes apart from I really do think we need to look to the community to help us with this.
Thank you, Katharine. Okay, so this is an interesting question, and you may answer by saying we will follow this up after the call, so I'll give you that head start. This particular person is planning on sending up to 400 people to work at home who have never had a desk assessment at home. What's the advice? Are we suggesting that they might not need to do an assessment?
I will caveat by saying it depends how long you're expecting them to work from home for. You know, if you're sending them home because you're asking them to be at home for 7 days, although if you're sending all 400 home, with what the government was saying last night, it looks as if it could be a protracted a couple of months rather than a couple of weeks. Well, that was my interpretation. So if you're sending 400 people home and they've never had an assessment, and we're expecting them to be home for sort of 3-4 months, and they are highly intensive DSE workers, I think you're going to have to do assessments with them.
Brilliant, thanks, Katharine. I knew you'd have an answer of some sort. Well done. But tricky questions these, because I think we're all in a situation where this is quite an emerging thing that we're having to be quite fluid, having to adapt quickly and make sure that we are keeping Britain working and all that sort of stuff in a time where a lot of us are not as prepared as we could have been. We've all got our pandemic response plans and that sort of stuff, and they're brilliant. However, when it really comes to the reality, we still have to test. We still have to actually go, okay, well, we know what we're supposed to do, but suddenly, well, it says in our plan, we need to issue wipes and gloves and that sort of stuff, but we haven't got enough stock. So I think, as with all of these things, we have to adapt and be common sense and make practical decisions. So that's all the questions. In fact, I think we've answered all the questions that have been asked. So thanks very much for sending all those in. This will be available. This is recorded, and so will be available on through posturite.co.uk/webinars and through our YouTube channel shortly. We also will write up plain English answers to a lot of these questions as well, which will go along with the webinar. But Katharine has one more thing to add.
I just wanted to say, you can see my email on the screen at the moment. As I say, this is an emerging situation. If anyone wants to chat anything through further, I said it is my evaluation of the situation, please get in contact. And I think I will also, I'm going to try and look to put on another webinar, hopefully within the next week, looking at the employer's responsibility. I'm hoping to get a colleague of mine who's a lawyer maybe to be along too, who might be able to provide a better answer to some of the questions you provided today. So please watch this space. We are here to help, and as I say, I'm more than happy to try and help. So please use us, and we'll try and help you. And yeah, that really is it for me, Chris.
Super. Thank you, Katharine. Thank you, everybody. I hope everything goes well and all your plans come into fruition. And we will, again, talk to you next week by the sounds of things. Thanks very much.